Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
So
my life is so full of time now that I don't watch NFL football.
Well, we have the preliminary finals of Aussie Rules this weekend. That is what we would call semifinals. They call preliminary finals. And then the grand final, I believe, is the week after. So it's looking like the Adelaide Crows are in the driver's seat. They're the top seed. They're having a pretty strong playoffs, but really, it's anybody's game.
This is almost as exciting as syrup season.
So, what did you do on your first NFL-free Sunday?
We went over to a friend's house for dinner. And honestly, like, there was a time when, and I saw a couple seconds of it because it was actually on at their house. Just, they weren't, but
you didn't avert your eyes.
I just sort of walked past it. It was like on in the kitchen or something, so nobody was really watching it.
See,
but,
now if you
there was a time
liberal, you would have to judge them when you came in. How dare you watch football in my presence? Don't you know that people are dying? Don't you know that you're ruining these people's lives? Did you keep that inside?
I actually we had I think I had the conversation with them about this. I'm sure I did. But no, but there was a time when, because like I think we went over to their house at like 4:00, and I mean, because we have kids, I mean, they had dinner. We had dinner at like 5:30 or something. But I mean, there was a time when I would have nixed going out. If the Redskins had a 4:00 game, we wouldn't have gone to spend time with friends. I would have literally, like, my wife would have known better, actually. I see you rolling your eyes. She would have known that it was like a no-go zone. That, like, well, Redskins have a 4:00 game. We can't. Could we do like a 1:00? Right. So anyway, so I actually, to answer your question, I actually spent time with people and had a communal, experience.
So. You have a piece coming out. It's not up yet. Where you question. I only know this because you showed me secret copy of your work before it goes up.
Yes.
So I got intimate information. You've always been someone who has championed the gig economy. Liberals shouldn't get in the way of the rise of Uber. People like the convenience. Stop throwing a wet government blanket over technology. And
there's an entrepreneurial thing that I love too about it. Like, instead of governmental bureaucracy stifling creativity, like the idea that you could like start an app or and create your own job. I like that philosophically.
Right. So now we have this news that Facebook might have. Russia might have manipulated Facebook to spread fake news out there.
I don't think it's might have. Is it might have? I think it's that they have.
Right.
Facebook has admitted to this.
Right. And so then you take that to raise the question: Are these companies too monopolistic? There's no accountability for Facebook if they do something like this. There's no other social media service you can really go to if you don't like how they're doing their business. And how does, if forgive me if I'm making a stretch of a segue, what does this mean to our communal bonds if we're letting our lives being dictated by these social media companies who are completely transforming our day-to-day lives? Maybe nominally with our consent, but in reality, we're sort of swept up in it.
Yeah, no, it's a huge debate. I think that it's really hard to apply, all the old rules because Facebook and social media are such a game changer. It's such a disruptive technology. It has changed our lives in so many ways. And I am also worried about the unintended consequences of regulations too. Having said that, it's very obvious and very clear that Russia, used Facebook and actually purchased ads via and you couldn't. It would be hard to imagine them like making a TV commercial with a disclaimer and running it on a cable TV, a 30-second ad, but they were able to more precisely target using the data that Facebook is allowed to use. Comcast. This isn't in my. I think this got cut from my column actually, but like Comcast, my cable company here, they can't. They can't use like what channels I watch, what my browser history, because they're my cable company and my internet provider. Imagine if Comcast could sell information about me. That's like, this is what TV channels he watches. This is his browser history. God forbid they get that. It's a joke, Bill. And this is where he lives, and that they could precisely target an ad just to me. So they can't do that. There's privacy concerns and whatnot. But so Facebook can do that, and they can run these ads that don't, they haven't been FEC approved or whatever. So I mean, long story short, I'm just starting. I think it's something we really need to grapple with, and I'm not comfortable encouraging more regulation of the internet, but I think clearly Facebook, opened the door to that by abdicating the moral responsibility they had, and frankly, by opening us up to the thing that Russia did. Was it's not just that they were trying to swing an election potentially, which is obviously a huge problematic thing, but they're also ripping at the social fabric of this country by stirring up bitterness and acrimony and playing on fears. Very clearly, that's one of the things they were up to, and we can't allow that to happen, Bill. Well,
it seems like there are parallel divides on the left and right when it comes to these sorts of questions. So, from the conservative vantage point, laissez-faire, no regulation, let the markets work. But there is a corollary conservative argument, which is if you have a monopoly, then that's not the market's working. You don't have free and fair competition if one company dominates and then undercuts everybody and chases everybody out of the market. That's not how capitalism is supposed to be. And there's a similar argument that happened on the left back in FDR's time. Do you partner with corporations to bring about minimum wage and maximum hours and anti-child labor, or is bigness the problem? You have to make things small so you don't have consolidation of power in corporate America. And that FDR started cooperatively with big business and got smacked down by the Supreme Court. And Brandeis was the chief. He was the chief anti-bigness voice. He was an anti-bigness voice in Woodrow Wilson's days. And they were having those debates back then. So now you have people like, you mentioned this in the column, I believe, Steve Bannon and Newt Gingrich being critical of Facebook and Google, saying they're too monopolistic and these people need to be broken up. And you have other folks, I think you cited Guy Benson, making the more laissez-faire argument. And I wonder if that's a legitimate substantive disagreement to have. But I wonder if among some conservatives, the fact that Facebook and Google are seen as progressive-minded companies, secular liberal companies, as opposed to, there's no push on the right to break up the oil cartel. Because culturally speaking, oil is conservative. Oil is not hippie environmentalism. Hey, if these guys, you give oil companies government subsidies, and conservatives will agree to that because there's a cultural identification with the company.
So first of all, I'm sure that there's hypocrisy, and I'm sure some people are just out to get them because they're perceived to be on the other side. I also think it's fair to say that Facebook is different because they're dealing in ideas and in shaping worldviews, and as obviously oil is incredibly important, but this is much more sort of in our face, and it's dealing with how we talk to one another, literally what information we're even seeing. There's talk right now that John Kelly is helping influence Trump by managing what he sees, and Facebook can literally do that, via their algorithm. So I think it's slightly different. I do agree, though, that this debate, I think, transcends the once again is becoming a trend in the Trump era. This does not break evenly from the left and right paradigm. In a way, it's sort of like a libertarian versus a communitarian divide. And there are some people who believe that business is like always a good, you know what I mean? But like, I don't want to live in a community that looks like Las Vegas. You know what I mean? Like, I want to live I would rather live in Mayberry than Las Vegas. And so I think there's a similar thing here, like, happening where, I'm all for, entrepreneurism and innovation, but those things, generally, I think we need to encourage them. But if there's an abuse, as clearly was the case with Russia, then I think like we need to reevaluate that a little bit. And there are things, and this goes back to Bannon, talking about, I think it was Bannon who said, like, maybe Tucker Carlson also talks about, maybe it's Tucker, we're not an economy, we're a country that has an economy. And so, I mean, there are things that are more important than making money, and this is playing out, I think, like in real time in the Facebook debate. It's like, never mind what they're doing in terms of the elections, but like Facebook, and especially when it's being gamed by bad actors, is really messing with the social fabric of this country. I mean, I think cable TV, cable news is doing the same thing. I mean, obviously Donald Trump breaking norms. There's a lot of weird stuff happening in America right now.
To segue from there, and to segue from what you said about Kelly, Chief of Staff Kelly managing Trump's information flow, there was some talk that Kelly's role played a role in Trump's deal making with Schumer and Pelosi, 3-month debt limit extension, government spending extension, a tentative deal on Dreamers. That might not have happened if Trump was if there was a back channel with Bannon and Steve Miller, whispering nationalism and white supremacism in his ear. But then you have this Trump UN speech, which is seems purely Bannonite. There's there's a New York Times podcast, The Daily, which is a really excellent morning podcast. If you're looking for like something 20 minutes long to kind of give you some extra insight into your day, I think they do a really great job. So they talked about how Trump talked about how nation, we put America first, you should put your own countries first. You should put your sovereignty first and want to protect your nation's culture. And they point out that that's sort of classic Stephen Miller to talk about culture. It's sort of white supremacist code to use that kind of language.
Well, and Spencer Ackerman at the Daily Beast found like a quote from Putin that was like very eerily consistent with like some of the lines from Trump's UN speech.
Right, so that would suggest that Kelly's not controlling everything going on.
Let me ask you, I'm curious about this. So I do believe that it's true, sadly, unfortunately true, that there are elites in America who see themselves as citizens of the world. They're not patriotic, in my opinion. And they do not even believe in the concept of the nation state. They see that as antiquated. So I think it's fair for a president who cares about things like bringing people together, if Trump did care about things like bring people together, or uniting us for a common purpose to talk about this. But in my opinion, that's more of a domestic. That's not a conversation you would have at the UN General Assembly. That's a conversation you would have with a domestic audience. So I'm curious why Trump, because I think he talked about sovereignty. Somebody said like 21 times or something. He used that. I'm curious, what do you think he was up to with, like, he didn't just mention this. He like belabored this point.
I think there are very few things Trump has actual convictions about, and I think a total disregard for internationalism is one of them. That goes back a long way to the world's laughing at us. We're paying for everybody's defenses. They're getting security on the cheap. It shouldn't be our responsibility to do all this stuff. All the protectionism on the for trade that goes back decades. I think he has a deep-seated belief that America's actions should not be constrained in any way by international organizations and international norms and international law. But
that contradicts other things he said during the speech.
Well, that's unusual for Trump to have a lack of intellectual consistency.
And why not? And I mean, I think you could totally go in there and give a speech where you said, I'm president of America. I'm going to put our interests first, but our interests also involve a strong international community, and we're going to help take the lead on that. And you could definitely play up American greatness and American exceptionalism. Why go to the part about saying, basically echoing, remember Barack Obama said, I believe in American exceptionalism just like people in Poland believe in Polish, or whatever it was.
Right.
Why did Trump have to say, like, and in you other countries, you should, like, your top priority should be putting your citizens first?
Well,
like, I didn't understand.
I think it's the fundamental hypocrisy in the whole America First movement, because Bannon, Nigel Farage, these people travel the world encouraging nationalism in their own countries.
It's an internationalist movement or cabal about not paying attention to other, it's an international like network of people who want you to not pay attention to things happening internationally.
Right. This is an international movement to undermine the United Nations, to undermine NATO, to undermine any sense that there are international laws and norms that should dictate individual countries' behavior. And so, Trump is obligated to give a UN speech. Everyone comes for the General Assembly and all the world leaders give speeches. Here's his opportunity to, inject that message to everybody. Hey, I'm telling all of you, go do what you want. But again, to the extent that gets in America's way, we're going to crush you.
Yes, exactly my point, which is to say that I think that message was inconsistent with some of the other things he said, and some of the things he said that I thought were very good. And I think a lot of the speech, probably the majority of the speech, could have been delivered by a typical Republican president, sort of a Reagan, or some of it could have been George W. Bush, some of it could have been Reagan. So maybe most of the speech probably was sort of standard boilerplate Republican, rhetoric. But that part, that struck me as very weird.
Well, this is the fallacy of the nationalist argument. The nationalist argument applied to North Korea is, oh, we all get to do what we want for our sovereignty? Great, I'm going to get a nuke. Getting a nuke is fantastic for North Korean sovereignty, so I'm going to go do that now.
Why wouldn't Kim want to make his country great and be focused on his people, according to this logic, right? I mean, if you're to take Trump at sort of his word, it's like they see that as their national interest. Probably is in their best interest, honestly.
I mean, the whole point
we'll
of
see
having
unless Trump nukes them.
Right.
I mean, which could happen. I think we probably underestimate the possibility that he actually could do that. But anyway, there is a logic to what they're behaving rationally.
Right, and the whole point of international organizations and norms and laws coming out of the horrible experiences of World War I and World War II is, hey, you know what? If we're all operating on raw national impulse, we're gonna bump into each other a lot, and a lot of people are gonna die. So maybe we need to have some other structure so we can have some international agreements. Trump is, I think he's setting up the UN to fail by saying, hey, this is your chance to show that you can stand up to North Korea when we all know, this horse has left the barn, number one. And two, the only thing that I think would potentially be a credible argument to North Korea to step back is taking the Iran deal seriously and following it through. So I keep hearing, North Korea is interpreting the lesson of Libya, that the Bush administration had a deal with Libya, that they would give up their WMD and cooperate in the fight against Al-Qaeda, and they did that, and then Obama comes along and takes Gaddafi out. So that lesson is, hey, you disarm yourself, you're ripe for the picking. I get that argument, except for the fact that Obama then had a deal with Iran to say, hey, you don't pursue a nuclear weapon. We give you a deal that you can have nuclear power for energy purposes, and we'll begin the process of economically reintegrating you into the region. So if you undermine that deal, then you further buttress the Libya case. If you want to negate the Libya case, you have to follow through on the Iran deal. So you go to North Korea and say, look, we mean it. We will let you be your own country if you don't pursue a nuclear weapon, and we will respect that. But Trump wants to have everything. He always wants to have his cake and eat it too.
But I think in the case of Iran, the difference is most of us don't believe that Iran is really giving up their
there's no proof of that yet. I mean, if you want to sit back and let Iran hang itself and prove your point, go ahead. But what is the value of talking Iran down when there's zero evidence that they are violating the deal?
Zero evidence? I think, haven't we seen some proof that they have cheated on this deal already?
They're doing some other things with missiles that are not part of the nuclear deal. And you could say, well, that's an issue that needs to be addressed. But it's not an actual violation of the deal. I mean, even the Trump people will say itself, well, this is a violation of the spirit and not the letter of the deal. I think on some level, I mean, it's hard to know exactly what's in Trump's head. I mean, on one hand, he's bashing Iran left and right. And on the other hand, they're certifying the deal. They just certified it for the second time this month. So, I mean, on some level, I feel like Trump loves to talk trash and not follow through. He wants to talk like a belligerent warmonger, but I don't know if he actually wants to start a war and own that. It's more fun to talk trash.
Yeah, that's a good point. Why did he? I mean, he really was, bashing the deal yesterday, like at the UN, but you're right, they just recertified it or whatever. So I mean, that's so inconsistent.
I mean, it probably is just Trump not being a very bright person, not actually squaring competing thoughts in his head. But to be more devilish, it could mean they're trying to goad Iran into actually violating the letter of the agreement, not just the spirit. To say, hey, what's the point of holding? Clearly, they're out to get us. So why should we take this deal seriously? And then they cross the line.
Well, that actually would be consistent with what Trump said. Remember, he said that he wasn't going to break the deal, but he was going to basically force them to comply with the letter of the law. Believe me, nobody knows contracts better than I do. Nobody reads them closer than I do. He said something like that, right, on the campaign.
I will police that deal. That was before he took a harder line on it, but he was first going, I'm a deal guy. You got to respect the deal. And maybe there's some part of it that still is like that. That I just can't leave a deal, the precious deal. But
I love the do a deal thing. It's not make a deal. It's do a deal. It's like Jerry Seinfeld has a new comedy thing out on Netflix, and he gets into the online versus inline. Do a deal. I don't know. It's new to me, but
well, you're not a New Yorker.
We don't talk like that in Wolfsville, Maryland.
So I had a piece in Politico this week, which has not engendered the same level of hatred as my single-payer insanity piece from the week prior, but it is about the dealings between the Democrats and Trump, which have generally been seen as the Democrats rolling Trump, or Trump, backstabbing Ryan and McConnell for his own narrow purposes, and I think that is largely true. I'm not someone to say that that Schumer and Pelosi were wrong to do the 3-month debt limit deal. They're not wrong to pursue a DACA Dream Act deal. But if you heard those Schumer hot mic comments where he's telling some unnamed Senate colleague, oh, he likes us. Oh, he likes me anyway. I told him, here's what I told him. You can't just go in one direction all the time. You have to be able to step right and step left. If you're only going in one direction all the time, you're boxed. And then he said he gets that. And then he ends from what we heard, he says, oh, it's all going to work out, and we're going to be much more productive now. And that, to me, risks taking this detente too far. I had a piece in Politico 6 months ago where I said, when is it okay to deal with Trump? You can't, Democrats can say, well, the Republicans instructed Obama all the time. Why can't we do the same thing? Well, they actually didn't instruct Obama all the time.
I gotta jump in real quick. Yeah. So first of all, you saw Nancy Pelosi got basically shouted down in San Francisco the other day. But I sent out a tweet. I'm sure you saw this. I sent out a tweet a week ago, let's say, where I said something to the effect of, I'm slightly surprised that that Democrats are, that Chuck and Nancy are doing this with Trump, because, there would have been a temptation to just deprive him of any victories at all. And there were, it might have been like Chris Hayes. There were some liberals, Iglesias maybe, who pushed this tweet out, and they were like making the argument that, like, what Matt doesn't understand is Democrats are about governing. Democrats are about getting things done. Republicans are, they're the ones who are bad and are obstructionist. And I felt like that was very convenient. Well, and the other thing is, there were people who saw this as like a Rorschach test. Like, of course, Matt Lewis would. I'm paraphrasing here, but it was like projection. Like the fact that I was slightly surprised. I was slightly surprised. I wasn't even like shocked, but I was like, maybe it was slightly shocked, but slightly. The fact that I thought Democrats might try to obstruct and deprive Trump of any victory was me projecting my evil nature, my Republican brain, onto these great noble Democrats. Because God knows Chuck Schumer has never played politics, and certainly would not play politics with 800,000 dreamers. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the private comments of Schumer, this was not for public consumption, does suggest he wants a broader range of deal making. He's not doing the bare minimum. So my argument is it's not tenable to be 100% obstructionist. You can't just sit back and watch the government shut down, watch America default on the debt and cause a global economic panic. You can't let 700,000 dreamers get deported and literally do nothing and expect to not take some responsibility for that when there are things you could have done. But
I would say, and this is something I didn't get to tweet, because once that happens, once your tweet has been taken, like, there's no like arguing or but I would say a couple things sort of about this. I would say, like, number one, I agree. Like, I'm glad that, like, I think we've had enough of like nothing getting done. I think the public like wants something to happen, like good or bad, like just like pass something, let's have some cooperation, I think that's a positive development. And I think a lot of people are just like, let these guys work together. Like, where's Reagan and Tip O'Neill when you need them, you know? So like, so it might just be that like Schumer and Pelosi recognize that the public is sick of obstructionism. Like maybe there was a time for that, but that time they've done it to death, right? The second thing I think is, it's not as if, like, let's praise Schumer and Nancy for cutting a deal, but they got everything they wanted. I mean, like, let's be cynical and talk about the fact that, like, there's 800,000 dreamers that someday may become citizens and may bring their relatives here via chain migration. And what percentage of them are going to vote Democratic? Pretty high. Maybe partly because Republicans have let those people know that they hate them. So it's in, you know, it's not like Schumer is being purely benevolent here. I mean, Democrats.
That deal's not done yet. I mean, you know, part of my piece is Schumer and Pelosi got a bit ahead of themselves by announcing an agreement to work on a deal, which gives Trump the headline of "Look at me, I'm Trump, I'm art of the deal, I'm breaking Washington, the Washington gridlock," and you actually haven't done anything yet. We don't know what concessions are going to be demanded on the border security side of it. We know there's going to be something, and I argued in the piece it's not fair to expect there to be zero border security. I mean, the wall is sort of, we talked about this a lot on the last show, you know, the wall is a sort of grotesque symbol that Democrats can't really capitulate on, but the basic notion that,
although they did support it in 2006,
well, fencing. I mean, right. This is relevant. It's always been the case that even Democrats say, yeah, you have to patrol your border. We do have laws about who can cross the border, and it's not a tenable position, policy-wise or politically, to say those laws don't count at all. So you can't go in and say, gee, I really love to save 780,000 people from being deported to unfamiliar homelands, but I'm going to prevent you from doing anything at all to enforce border laws. Like that's not a tenable position. So there are ways you can take border security too far. I'm not saying that means it's open season, but it's fair to expect there to be some pairing on that front, and this is why Pelosi got some guff in San Francisco. Now, I heard the chanting there. There was some chant on the lines of, you know, the Democratic Party won't protect us, something like that, which says to me, this is not just a cross section of dreamers. These are people who are anti-democratic, far left, probably socialist folks who are trying to make a political point that the Democratic Party is an inherently corrupt institution. So I doubt they are representative of most dreamers. Obviously, I'm not a dreamer myself. If some dreamer in the thread wants to tell me otherwise, go right ahead. That's my sense of it. So I do think Pelosi and Schumer are doing what is morally correct and politically necessary on the DACA front, short of announcing a deal prematurely. I don't think they need to do that. Where I think it goes beyond doing the bare minimum into things that are politically not wise is, say, tax reform. There is no moral imperative to do corporate tax reform. If we don't do tax reform for the next 4 years, we're all going to be okay here. That is just giving Trump a unnecessary political win if it actually happened. It's not like there's going to be some giant windfall for the middle class if this came through. But Schumer is signaling not just for himself, but to the party in general. Trump gets that. Trump gets that he shouldn't be right-wing all the time. He's open for business. Go meet with them. See what you can get. And so he's already had a couple other meetings outside of Schumer with other House and Senate moderates talking tax reform, and how Schumer and Pelosi did a fantastic job keeping everyone unified on health care. It's going to be much harder to do that now because he's telling Democrats, go for it. See what you can get. If you lose 3 Senate Democrats, if you lose, well, again, it depends whether they do reconciliation or not. But so I can't say exactly what number it's going to be. But some number of Democrats, not too many, might break ranks on taxes, and you do a party line vote in the House, and boom, Trump's got an enormous victory, which there was no moral obligation to give to him. So I think, I mean, I'm sympathetic. It's a very fine line to draw, and it's hard to keep caucuses unify. I mean, Democrats broke ranks with Bush on taxes. Tax cuts can be a very politically tempting thing to do. But I think Schumer is being a little sloppy is not quite the word, but a little too generous in his dealings with Trump at the time that had come with risks.
So maybe this is a good time to segue to the is it Cassidy-Graham Cassidy?
I think Graham Cassidy. Sounds like, Graham, in the order of seniority,
it sounds like it's
please.
Like a Partridge Family type situation. I don't know, or maybe it's like a Crosby, Stills, Graham and Cassidy.
Now, did you see Jimmy Kimmel last night?
I missed it, but obviously I've heard the clips, seen the clip, and let me just a slight diversion here, but it's consistent with what I've been saying. I don't need to hear politics from Jimmy Kimmel. I don't want to hear it from ESPN. I don't want to hear politics in my football. I don't remember Johnny Carson lecturing me about politics or just can't he just do funny stuff?
So you might not know this. So you were one of the folks who criticized him the first time round, saying he was politicizing the health crisis for his newborn baby.
He was.
And in his evisceration of Cassidy last night, and I got to say that I don't think I've seen as thorough an evisceration on television. I mean, he put John Oliver to shame in his evisceration. What's that?
And I know he said he said that Cassidy lied to him to his face, and then he put up his phone number. I think
it was just the Capitol switchboard number. It wasn't his personal phone number, but he's telling everybody to.
I know it wasn't his. I thought it was like his office number.
No, it was the main Capitol switchboard line. So he told everyone to flood Congress with calls today. But towards the end of the monologue, he says, some people said to me, why are you politicizing what's going on with your child? And he says, that's right. I am politicizing what's going on with my child. And so I thought he's looking right at Matt Lewis when he's saying that.
Yeah. But he was wrong about stuff too. I mean, it's one thing. So I would object to a comedian doing he's not George Carlin. Okay. I mean, there is a place for this is a guy who has a late night show. And if he wants me to watch it, which I'm not going to do, he could stick to the jokes, shut up and dance or whatever.
But he did have.
But he would also need to have his facts right. Now, I don't know about last night, but the original time, 6 months ago or whatever, when we got into this little thing, he just was wrong about the details too. So that was the part that bothered me.
Well, last night he said that Cassidy came on his show and went on other shows and said any healthcare reform needs to pass the Jimmy Kimmel test, which so everybody who was in a similar situation would not get socked with some kind of lifetime cap that would make care for your at-risk newborn break the bank. And he's saying this bill doesn't do that. It gives states the leeway to have lifetime caps. It also allows states to bring back discrimination against pre-existing conditions. He promised that any reform should cover everybody. This is not going to cover everybody. Therefore, he lied to my face. So you can say Kimmel, go back to the Man Show with Adam Carolla and talk about juggies and not talk about politics all over again.
I prefer Ben Stein's money personally. That's a guy who knows his economics.
But once you have the politician on your show and is using your name to sell his position, doesn't have the right to say, hey, you are distorting, you're selling policies there that are offensive to my name, and I'm going to call you out on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple debates to be had here. There's a substantive debate. There's a debate about, politics and my entertainment. And I'm just, maybe this is just me. I'm just not going to watch these shows anymore. This is why I'm not watching these shows now. I mean, you can't turn on a football game, let's say, or ESPN, and I do politics all day long, and you can't just check out from that and hear a joke. It has to be like always politics in your face. So maybe this is unique to me since this is what I do for a living.
So what are you down to watch now?
What's the joke about the gynecologist that comes home and says, "Honey, if I see one more," you know what I mean? Like, I don't need more politics, and so there's that part of it. But look, Jimmy Kimmel. Remember, I wrote that piece back in January, way ahead of the curve, about all the problems. Am I sounding like Donald Trump? I wrote that piece way ahead of the curve. Beautiful piece. Amazing piece. A lot of people came up to me and said this is the best piece that anyone wrote on healthcare, and that it was so much farther ahead of all the other pieces. But, I was talking about how these Republican plans were like a Rube Goldberg scheme and they just would fall apart. The good thing about this Graham Cassidy, proposal is that it's elegant in its simplicity. It's basically federalism, and I can pretty much assure you that California, in fact, I would be okay. Someone said that they don't want this to happen. If California wants to do single payer, let them.
Well, I know there is a resolution. I think Senator Kennedy of Louisiana wants a plank to ban that, so they couldn't do single payer.
I think that's wrong. Let New York and California run their health care the way they want to do it. If they want to do single payer, if they want to go for it. And then, so I think that, Jimmy Kimmel lives in California. He's going to be fine. He's also like a multimillionaire too, as well, I'm sure, but he's going to be fine.
Well, that was his argument that the Graham Cassidy bill passes the Jimmy Kimmel test and that Jimmy Kimmel is going to be fine, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, what you say is elegant in its simplicity can also be interpreted as crude in its simplicity, that there's a lot of complicated situations on the ground that these few reforms are going to cause. All the major health organizations are against it. There's no sense that it's not going to expand coverage. It's a more libertarian states' rights approach to things. If you
which I think is like, if you live in California and the people of California decide to do single payer, love it. Go for it.
Now, Rand Paul says,
and by the way, the people who love sanctuary cities, what if we had like the pro-life sanctuary city? People would be up in arms about, I think that both sides are probably a little bit hypocritical about when they want states to have. Let's go back to that word sovereignty that became so famous yesterday.
Well, the states' rights argument is always good when it's good for your side. When the federal policy is against your side, you're for states' rights. And when the federal policy is on your side, you're against states' rights. But I also, Obamacare has a lot of federalism in it. There's a lot of flexibility for states. It's not one size fits all. There are minimum standards. There's minimum benefit standards that go across the board, so you don't have a race to the bottom. But there's lots of ways that even the Medicaid expansion, you're seeing the conservative states that are doing it got waivers to do conservative reforms to Medicaid in the process. So it's not like it's all top down. But
wasn't that via litigation? Like the fact that states could opt out.
Yes, that is a fair point. Roberts forced that upon the Obama administration. That is a fair point. He said you can't make the Medicaid expansion requirement. It has to be voluntary. But within that, there was back and forth between the states and Obama to say, okay, you want to try this with Medicaid, you may do that. They had additional pressure to do that because they could opt out altogether. But even the exchanges can be done. Outside of that, the exchanges were supposed to be state by state, not federally run. They only have more federal involvement because a whole bunch of states refused to do it, and therefore they became more federally run. But the idea was that you can do what you want, based on certain criteria. Yeah. You can try different things.
And I know it's a cliche on the right to talk about laboratories of democracy and all that, but there's something to it. If one state has policies that tax people too much, people are voting with their feet, and people are moving from California to Arizona and to Florida and to Texas, and industries are coming to places like Texas. And so, you could let the states try things out and see what works best. And, you know, that could be, here we go with the innovation versus the sort of the innovation argument versus the sort of security community thing.
But we had Wild West for a long time. It's not like we've only had a government-run healthcare marketplace since America's inception. Obamacare's only been in effect for a few years. This all comes about because the Wild West of healthcare wasn't working for a lot of people. A lot of people were not covered. Costs were going up, pre-existing conditions, all that stuff. So what do you do in response? And Cassidy doesn't seem to be talking straight with people because the libertarian approach to healthcare is not to cover everybody. So don't claim you're going to cover everybody if that's what you're going to do next. It's just a different philosophy to healthcare.
Well, it depends what state you live in, too. I mean, different states could have presumably have different.
If you want to say we should have a states' rights healthcare system where some states don't have individual mandates or requirements everyone's covered, then say that. Don't claim you're going to be covering everybody.
States' rights is such a low. I mean, we could call it something else.
Whatever word you want to use, I don't care. Yeah. But the impetus of Graham Cassidy is not to cover everybody. That is not the basis of the bill. Don't claim that it is.
Well, do they claim that it does?
Well, I mean, the Kimmel model, he shows clips of Cassidy saying that we need to cover everybody.
Okay. Well, that may be I mean, look, it may be a fair point that Cassidy shouldn't have gone on Kimmel and talked about that,
So is Matt Lewis saying he is for Graham Cassidy?
I'm Graham Cassidy curious. I think that, look, as you know, Bill, this is probably the last shot Republicans have, right?
There's a little clock. The Senate parliamentarian has said reconciliation instructions expire on September 30th. After that day, if you want to do health care, it's 60 votes, not 50 votes.
Right. So it's basically this versus the status quo. I think this is probably better than the status quo.
So if you're Collins, Murkowski, or McCain, I don't remember all the arguments that Collins and Murkowski made against the previous repeal bills. I do know that one of them was I'm not going to let you defund Planned Parenthood. It wasn't the main thing, but it was one of the things. And I do know Graham Cassidy does ban Planned Parenthood funding, so I know it violates that criteria of theirs. McCain's whole point was we need regular order, we need committee hearings, this should be bipartisan.
That's not going to happen.
Right, that's obviously
not going to happen in the next 10 days or whatever.
And you also have Rand Paul saying this is Obamacare light in part because it keeps the Obamacare taxes. It might repeal the individual mandate. It might repeal the essential benefits.
Everyone should go read. Jonah Goldberg wrote a nice blog post about Rand Paul. Nothing's ever good enough for Rand Paul.
I mean, I totally agree. I think Rand Paul is congenitally opposed to saying yes. But it is a fair point to say, I'm going to call it repeal, but I'm going to keep the taxes. That doesn't seem to be a very conservative approach to policy.
No, but now, I mean, and Republicans have always, when they were trying to push through things, they would always say, you're either for this or you're for Obamacare, right? And that was I think an unfair argument, but now actually I think we are now at the point where basically it is a binary choice now. I think it probably is.
But so let's take Rand Paul out of the equation for the moment. If you're Collins, Murkowski, or McCain, now McCain is almost surely in his last term and is not going to face the voters again. If he wants to flip flop, he can do whatever he wants. If you're Collins or Murkowski, is it tenable to, there are photos of Murkowski being hugged in the airport for standing up to the last bill. How does she go back to Alaska and say, well, that bill was terrible, but this bill was okay? What is the argument for that?
It's probably not going to happen. I think the one to watch is John McCain. You need one more vote, right?
Well, not if you lose Rand Paul.
Good point. So maybe it's a moot point. But I would even say with McCain, the only reason that I think he's even someone joked about this on Twitter that it's maybe the key should have been getting John McCain's best friend to co-sponsor a healthcare bill. The only argument for McCain to do this is that he's best friends with Lindsey Graham. But otherwise, now he's saying, well, we'll see what the Governor Ducey or I'm going to go with what the governor wants. But it's inconsistent with everything John McCain said about regular order. There's not going to be like a CBO report on this. There's not going to be the committee hearings. I mean, maybe there'll be like one hearing or something. They're not going to do due diligence on this. I think McCain. I do not think McCain would be the deciding vote for this, because I think he's thinking legacy, and he's decided that he sort of, that was his legacy vote last time, and to switch on this, I don't think would make sense if you're in legacy.
If you want to cap your career saying, I am going to plant my flag for regular order, bipartisanship, comedy, if we go back on that, this institution's not going to survive.
It totally undermines that stand he took last time. And he's got to be thinking legacy, right? I mean, I like John McCain, but he, number one, this is probably, he's getting to the end of his career. And clearly, as much as I think he is a very heroic person, he's somebody who wants to be thought of a certain way. He wants to have a legacy. That's perfectly natural, but so I don't see him voting for this, especially if his vote, the more his vote matters, the less likely I think it is that he would vote for this.
Now, and why would a Rob Portman, who made a big deal about opioid funding in the last bill, so that was the price for his support. Graham Cassidy doesn't have any opioid funding, it's my understanding. How does he go back to his voters and say, I got nothing for the opioid crisis here?
I think you probably made a good argument for why this won't pass.
Well, even if it did pass the Senate, it would have to get to the House. It'd have to pass as is, any changes whatsoever. I mean, you do have that Rand Paul argument out there that you're keeping Obamacare taxes. The Freedom Caucus guys might not like that. Get it all done by the end of the month.
The one argument I would say in favor of this bill is that it flips the script. It is an outside the box idea that Republicans, like, let's give up on this perfect thing that's going to, well, we got to get people to sign up, so we're going to have tax rebates, but it has to be refundable, all that stuff that you get in the game of, like, we got to, like, outspend the Democrats, or we can't, the Democrats have basically decided that you can never cover fewer people, and therefore we're just going to accept that premise. Like, this flips that script. And so that is the one thing that I think makes this a very intriguing possibility, that they might actually be able to overcome what would seemingly be inconsistent comments they made about past bills. Because you could very well say, look, California could have universal coverage. California can do what, they can have single payer, whatever they want to do, they can do. This isn't about cutting coverage. This is about letting local government and people closer, make those sort of important decisions.
Perhaps we should leave it on that note. Unless you have any final point you want to make.
I don't want to be like John Kelly, like, what was his every picture of John Kelly is like,
I think, Matt, you should. I think we both agree this probably won't pass. And
if I had to bet, I bet no, for all the reasons you've outlined.
In 10 days, Republicans perhaps can finally stop obsessing about Obamacare and think about something else.
Not necessarily true, Bill, because they have next year budget reconciliation they could use for healthcare.
Well, but they want to do it for taxes, right? I guess they could include it again. They could say we can still do it for healthcare. They could. I just as much as I don't understand why the left wants to obsess about single payer, I don't understand why the right wants to obsess about Obamacare repeal.
What have they done that would lead you to believe that they're willing to walk away from Obamacare?
What's that?
Repeal. What have Republicans done that would lead you to believe that they're willing to walk away from repealing and replacing Obamacare?
The fact that it has been nothing but headache and heartache for years.
One more try, Bill. One more try. This time we got them right where we want them.
All right, sir. We'll talk next week.
You got it. Check us out at DMZ Show on Twitter. Read Bill at Politico Magazine. Check out my podcast and your podcast.
My podcast. This is Not Normal at liberaloasis.com. I got another good Politico piece in the hopper. It's going to be a few days, but keep an eye out for it.
And keep an eye out for my Daily Beast piece about Facebook and Russia.
Absolutely. Till next week, sir.
You got it. See you guys.
Bye.